All right, today we're diving into a real philosophical head-scratcher, the linguistic turn. Think of it like a detective story. We're going to figure out why, in a century that was just absolutely packed with chaos, some of the smartest people on the planet got completely obsessed with language.
I mean, seriously, think about it. You've got world wars, you've got massive social change. Science is literally rewriting the fabric of reality. And in the middle of all that, some of the world's top thinkers decided the real problem, the most urgent puzzle to solve, was words? Language? It sounds kind of weird, right? But that's the mystery we're digging into.
Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, we've got to rewind. Let's go back to the start of what the historian Eric Hobsbawm famously called the extreme 20th century. And wow, was he right. This was a time of just insane change. Old empires crumbling. New tech, it was popping up everywhere, completely changing how people lived. Honestly, it felt like the very ground beneath society's feet was starting to crack.
So for hundreds of years, philosophy was all about the big stuff, God, good versus evil, how we know what we know. But now the challenge was way more basic. It was like, if everything we thought was rock solid is suddenly up in the air, how can we be sure about anything at all? How do you build knowledge that's more than just, well, my opinion versus your opinion?
And this quote from Bertrand Russell, man, it just nails the problem. He's basically saying that my experience of the world and your experience of the world are completely separate. You can't see what's in my head, and I can't see what's in yours. So if that's true, how do we ever agree on what's objectively real? This massive doubt about the human mind, this idea that it's maybe not so reliable, is what forced philosophers to start looking for solid ground somewhere else.
Okay, so enter our first detective, a German thinker, part mathematician, part philosopher named Gottlob Frege. And he just storms onto the scene and completely flips the investigation on its head. He says, hey, maybe the problem isn't our flawed minds, maybe we're just starting in the wrong place altogether. And this is where you see this huge, huge shift. For ages, philosophy was all about us, the individual. It started with I. How do I know things? Everything was focused on our subjective, kind of messy human minds. But Frege, he just tore up that playbook. He said, look, let's just hit pause on our own brains for a minute. Let's talk about logic with a capital L, the actual objective blueprint of reality itself.
Frege's big idea was this: logic isn't something we just make up in our heads. Nope, it's something we discover. It's out there, in the universe, just as real as gravity or the number pi. He said there are basically two different worlds, the messy world inside our heads and this perfect, objective world of logic, totally separate. You know, a pretty cool way to think about it is like a computer's operating system. All that binary code, the ones and zeros that make everything work, it's there following its own perfect rules, whether you have any clue how it works or not. And that's what Frege thought logic was. It was the universe's operating system, just quietly doing its thing in the background, totally separate from our chaotic human thoughts.
All right, so that brings us to our next major player in this story, Bertrand Russell. Now, Russell reads Frege's work, and his mind is just blown. He thinks this is it. And he decides to take this super strict logical method and point it directly at the one tool we all use every single day to talk about reality, our language. So Russell points out something that seems obvious once you hear it. Every single time we talk to each other, there's a two-step dance going on. Step 1, you have to get the meaning of what's being said. Step 2, you have to figure out if it's true. Super simple, right? If I say, there's a blue car outside, first you understand the sentence, then you check if there actually is a blue car out there.
But wait, this is where things get really, really complicated. Russell shows that understanding the meaning, that's the easy part. But verifying the truth, oh man, that is a total minefield. You have to ask, what did the person mean to say? What's the context? How do you even check the facts? And this incredibly messy tangle between our words and the truth, well, that became the absolute obsession for a brand new branch of philosophy called analytical philosophy.
So this big messy problem that Russell uncovered, it basically lit a fire under a whole new crew of philosophical detectives. You've got this group called the Vienna Circle, and with them is this young, absolutely brilliant guy named Ludwig Wittgenstein. And their whole approach was, okay, enough of the mess. They wanted to go full-on scientific about it. Their mission? To basically strip down language, clean it up, and turn it into a perfectly precise tool for describing facts. Nothing more, nothing less.
And their big weapon was this thing called the principle of verifiability. And honestly, it's a simple rule, but it is brutal. It goes like this. If you make a statement and there's no way, not even in theory, to check if it's true through your senses, through experience, then that statement is, for all intents and purposes, meaningless.
It might be poetry, it might sound profound, but it's not actually saying anything about the real world.
Let's take a concrete example. Remember the cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin? When he went to space and said, "The Earth is blue," that statement is meaningful. Why? Because he could see it. You could send another person up there to verify it. It's a fact. But what if he had said, "The Earth is alive"? Now, that sounds beautiful, right? It's a great metaphor. But to the Vienna Circle, that's philosophically meaningless. You can't test it. It's not a verifiable fact. And all of this leads to what we call the pictorial theory, which comes from that brilliant young guy, Wittgenstein. His big idea was that a perfectly logical sentence could act like a perfect mirror. Its structure would perfectly match the structure of a fact out there in the world. So language, if you use it just right, could create a flawless picture of reality. And for a little while there, it really seemed like they had cracked the case. Problem solved.
But then, a plot twist. A huge, unexpected turn in the case. And you're not going to believe who the lead investigator was who blew the whole thing wide open. It was Wittgenstein, the same guy who came up with the picture theory. He, along with others like J.L. Austin, came to realize that their entire first approach was just wrong.
Get this. This one single quote from the later Wittgenstein, it changed everything. He threw his own pictorial theory right out the window, basically turning an entire philosophical movement upside down. He had this massive realization. We don't just use language to state facts. The meaning of a word isn't some fixed label you can stick on a thing. Nope. A word's meaning comes from how we actually use it in the messy, complicated, endless game of just talking to each other. Another philosopher, J.L. Austin, had a great name for this, speech acts. And it makes perfect sense when you think about it. When we talk, we are literally doing things. We're not just passively painting a picture of the world. We're jumping in and getting our hands dirty. Language is less like a camera and more like a toolkit. You've got your hammer for affirming things, a wrench for denying things, a screwdriver for asking questions. You get the idea. So really, it all boils down to context. Take a simple phrase like, "I'm sorry." What's the meaning? Well, who knows? It completely depends. Are you saying it because you just bumped into someone? That's a real apology. Are you saying it to someone who's lost a loved one? That's sympathy. Or are you saying it with a sarcastic eye roll? The words are identical, but the action you're performing, the use, is totally different. And so is the meaning.
And this realization, it wasn't just a small change. It was a full-blown philosophical earthquake. It opened the door for whole new fields, like hermeneutics, which is basically the art and science of interpretation. This whole new way of thinking accepts that truth isn't some sterile thing you find in a lab by matching facts. No, truth is about understanding meaning, and that meaning is always wrapped up in history and culture. We moved away from a cold logical picture and towards a messy, vibrant, living conversation. And so, this whole journey leaves us with one last, really challenging question. Think about it. The linguistic turn started as this desperate search for absolute, rock-solid certainty. But where did it end up? It ended up showing us that meaning itself isn't solid at all. It's slippery, it's contextual, it's human. So here's the kicker. If what a word means always depends on how it's used and who's interpreting it, is it even possible for any statement to be universally true, for everyone, everywhere, for all time? That's the question this whole detective story leaves us with, and it's one philosophers are still arguing about to this day.